Hello, everyone. I think we are live. Let me just come around. I'm at the back end of my, oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, there we go. I can see myself now. And I think that is a good angle. Welcome to Homemade with Heidi, as Maria has named it, with being sponsored by the Guilford Public Library. Today we are going to be making cinnamon rolls, and I'm going to let a few more people join on before we get started. Probably not the best day to pick something to bake in your oven. However, we are going to go with the flow, and we're going to learn how to do it today, so then you can be prepared and have them ready for when the next time you want to make them and not having to cook them on a scorcher of a day. I don't know about you, but I am a little bit done with this hot weather that we're having. So this is a very simple recipe. I'm not sure, and we will post the recipe down below once we're done. I've tried lots of different cinnamon roll recipes. My family likes this one because the dough is really just velvety, soft, it's light, it's fluffy, it's not a heavy, thick, dense cinnamon roll. So that is the one we like. This is the finished product. The recipe that I am going to post is going to have a thick frosting topping. However, my kids prefer kind of more of a light maple glaze. So I will teach you how to do the maple glaze that we use. If you prefer more of a cream cheese heavy topping, that will be in the recipe that is posted, and I will type out when this is all over what I used to make the maple glaze. So this is the final product. I made these this morning, a big sheet pan of them, and I'm not going to tell you, I had a note on this that said do not touch, and my 7-year-old actually cut out the not part, but luckily they left me one to show you as an example. So I'm not sure where I went wrong, but my children do not eat cold cereal. They like a hot breakfast, and I am a single mom of 3 and I homeschool. So in the morning, I cannot be a short order cook. So what I like to do is I like to make a lot of hot items that can be reheated in the morning and stock my freezer. I make pancakes, waffles, I make homemade sourdough English muffins, and I'll make breakfast sandwiches with them, or even just put the English muffins in the freezer, breakfast burritos. And it's when I make something, for example, we just went up north fishing, I made a triple batch of pancakes, and I just brought them with us, and that's what they had all week for breakfast. I brought some different kinds of sausage and bacon with them. That was easy to cook up, but I always make a big batch. And that's one great thing about these cinnamon rolls, is that you can either make them the night before, so that in the morning all you have to do is bake them, or you can make a batch and you can individually wrap them and freeze them, put them in your freezer, and then all you need to do is take them out and reheat them. And I love stocking my freezer with good, wholesome food. That makes it one thing easier for me in the morning, as I'm trying to rally the troops, get everybody going, and get started on our homeschool day. So let's get started. Let me tell you what you are going to need. You are going to need, let me grab my recipe. Pretty much have this memorized, but you will need 1 cup of warm milk. So I have the milk on my stove just warming up slightly. You need a tablespoon of dry yeast. Like I told you if you were with us when we made the hamburger buns, I open my package of dry yeast, I put it in an airtight sealed container, and I keep it in my fridge. All my other packets that aren't open, I throw them in the freezer, and just to prolong the life of my yeast. So you will need yeast. You need a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a large egg, as I go and spill it, and 3 tablespoons of butter, and 3 cups of flour. So flour, yeast, salt, sugar, butter, and an egg for your dough. Pretty simple and straightforward. For this recipe, it does call to use your KitchenAid mixer. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, I'm sure you can go ahead, just mix it with a wooden spoon, knead it with your hands, and you can get it. But we're going to use the mixer for this. So I'm going to get started. I am going to start with my 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of white sugar, my 1 egg from Ramblin' View Farm on Morrill Street. We did the chicken thing. We're taking a break from the chicken thing now. So we buy eggs from Miss Joyce down off of Morrill Street. My 3 tablespoons of softened butter. And my milk, which I think I might have gotten my milk a little bit too hot. I had it on ahead of time. So I'm going to put my yeast in. And my yeast is 1 tablespoon. Yeah, 1 tablespoon of my yeast. And I'm going to give it a minute. What I'm actually going to do is pour my milk out of that hot pan, because I believe I got it a little bit too hot. And I know we talked about before that if you're any liquid that you're adding to yeast, it can actually kill the yeast if it's too hot. So let it just sit there for a minute and cool off, and I will get these ingredients started. I'm just going to start it on low and mix them up. I've seen some pictures on Facebook of people who have tried the hamburger rolls, so I hope that you tried those. Those have become a favorite in our house for everything from hamburgers to pulled pork. We've done sandwiches on them. It's a great staple. I actually froze them for the first time. Like I said, we went up north and I did not want to cook while we were staying at the cabin, so I made the hamburger rolls at the beginning of the week. I froze them and they were perfectly fine using them, just taking them out and defrosting them at lunchtime and using them at dinner. So that was great. Okay, now I am going to take my milk, which is not scalding anymore, my warm milk, and I'm going to pour that in. It's 1 cup. You really just want to take the chill out of the milk. It definitely does not want to boil or get super hot. You just want the chill out of that. We're going to let that go. I'm going to grab a spatula. And then I'm going to add my flour in. 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I had said before I prefer King Arthur, but during quarantine, when we kind of got to our bare end, I was using just different brands, and you know, they all worked fine. It's just, this is just a personal preference. So let me just grab a scooper. Excuse me for being a little bit out of sorts today. I realized last night that I had agreed to do this at 1, and my son is sailing and his class gets out at 1. So one thing I have not been able to figure out as a mom is how to be at 2 places at once. So luckily a good friend stepped in and helped me with that. So we're going to add our 3 cups of flour. Just have my mixer on a low speed so that it starts to all incorporate. This dough, like the hamburger dough, is just a super soft, silky dough. It is lightweight. It's not heavy, and it just makes a great cinnamon roll. All right, I'm just going to put that all in. Once I have all my flour in, I'm actually going to turn it up probably to medium. I'm going to let the KitchenAid mixer do its job. You basically want to watch that the dough is going to be pulled away from the sides of the bowl. If you see that it's a little bit sticky, it looks a little bit wet, you can go ahead and add a little bit more flour into that. That will help with it. And my dough is pulling away from the sides of my bowl. It's getting onto that dough hook, and it is creating a nice ball of dough. And what I am going to do now that it's all mixed is I am going to turn off my mixer, and I'm going to take my dough out. I always like, whenever I'm handling dough, to have a little bit of extra flour. I put some on my hands. It just makes the dough not stick to my hands. I'll put a little bit on the surface, but what we want to do is just get this dough out of the bowl, make it into a nice ball. We're going to put it into a bowl, cover it, and you're going to let it rise for an hour. A little bit more flour from that mess that I made, so I'm just going to turn it on one more second, incorporate that last little bit. A little bit of flour on my hands and on the counter so it doesn't make a total mess, and just pull it right off of that hook. And get as much off of the hook as we can. Scraping up off the bottom of your bowl so that you get it all, and just plopping it down on your counter. A little bit more flour on your hands, and I'm sorry I can't touch the screen, but all I'm doing is just working it in, and this is what your dough is going to look like. It is soft and velvety. It should be nice and smooth, not wet or sticky. And that's it. That's what you have. You're going to take it, you're going to put it into a bowl. If I don't know if you use cooking spray, you can put a little bit of cooking spray on it. I take a little bit of oil on a paper towel, just wipe my bowl with that, and I am going to put that in my bowl. That's what it looks like, and you're going to let it rise for about an hour. Should double in size. So we talked about, I cover it over. We talked about, when we made the hamburger buns, different ways that you can aid in the process of letting your dough rise. There's a couple of schools of thoughts. One is, before you even start assembling any of your ingredients, you can go ahead, put your oven on about 160, let it come to temperature, and then turn it off. And then by the time you've collected all your ingredients and you've gotten to this stage, the oven should be at a good temperature to go ahead, put your dough in, and that will aid in the rising. I try to avoid any mistakes at all costs. I make enough mistakes on my own, so that method does make me a little bit nervous. I'm always afraid the oven's going to be too hot and that the dough will get a crust and I'll ruin the dough. So I don't do that one. What I will do is I will put it in the oven. I will put my oven light on, and they say that the heat that's generated by the oven light in a shut oven will just create enough warmth to help the rise of the dough. That is definitely my method of choice, especially when I don't have my wood stove on. When my wood stove is running during the winter time, I put all dough that I'm proofing right by the wood stove in the living room, which is the warmest room of the house during the winter. Of course, I'm looking at 82 outside, not inside, but you probably will not have a problem if you are making it during these warmer days with it being in a spot. So just cover it over. You can use a tea towel. You can put a piece of saran wrap or press and seal. If you're going to do that, you might want to spray it a little bit first, because as it rises, it may stick to the press and seal of the saran wrap, and then you'll lose some of that dough, where if you spray the surface that's going to touch the dough, it'll be much easier. So I'm going to put this off to the side, and I am going to grab my dough that I made about an hour ago, so you can see the difference of the size of this, and we are going to take it down and make our cinnamon rolls. So I just want to be sure, let me see here. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. You can see. Give myself a little bit of room, clean up a little bit of my mess. And you need a flat surface. Oh, I forgot one thing. Okay, no worries. I'll get it in a minute. Take off my saran wrap. And you're going to take it out. Take your dough out. I just plop it right on the counter. It's hard for me to see what you can, there we go. I think that's good. What you can see with my angle. And we are just going to work with it. Get yourself some flour on your hands. And what you are going to do is you are just going to pat this into about an 18 by 24 rectangle. Now, I am not a pastry chef or a chef by that means, trained, professional. So for me, it's just, obviously looks are important. Taste is definitely where it's at. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And you're just gonna use your hands and you're just gonna press that dough out and work it. Wherever the dough is thicker, that's where you're gonna just press and push and create that rectangular shape of dough. This dough smells so yeasty. It doesn't have a yeasty taste when it's cooked, but it smells delicious. Get a little bit more flour on your hands to help you kind of work it into your shape. I'm actually gonna turn it because I want my rectangle this way. Oh, that's definitely. You don't want it so thin that the dough is going to rip. But just keep on working it towards the edges, pressing and pulling. As long as your shape is rectangular, you're good. Because you're going to end up making a log with this. And this dough is just so easy to work with. Like I said, if you just need, sometimes I'm just going to put a little bit of flour there just because when I do roll it up, I don't want it to stick. And it's just easier to do that now instead of when I have my filling in. All right, I think I am good. I feel like it's pretty even all the way around. Patting it out. This is going to make 12 good-sized cinnamon rolls. So, it will be worth it in the end. I have found that with my children, sometimes just setting the breakfast table with some nice dishes and putting some flowers on, maybe getting a seasonal book or a holiday related book, putting those on the centerpiece of your kitchen table and having something special like cinnamon rolls for breakfast just sets the stage for the day and makes it seem like a special day. And for some reason, my kids seem to kind of respond better to that if they think something special is happening. So, and especially if you make these the night before, all you have to do is get up and bake them in the morning and you don't have to make a mess in your kitchen or take the time. Okay, good. So now you're going to take a stick of butter and you're going to melt it. This pan just does not like me. Put it in there. It's pretty soft. I'm just going to melt that butter over low heat until it melts. And we're going to make our filling. And I need to grab my pan, the one thing that I forgot that we're going to bake these in. Okay, so you're gonna bake these in a 9 by 11 or 11 by 13 dish. I actually bake them, I only have, believe it or not, I only have one dish this size. I'm not sure why. So I actually baked them this morning on a baking sheet and it worked out perfectly fine. But this will kind of keep them together and just make them a little bit nicer. I am gonna get my spray. And just spray my pan. My butter is starting to melt. So I have a half a stick of butter. I have a cup of brown sugar that's also going to go into the filling of these. And I have 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Sometimes we skip the cinnamon and we will use maple sugar, either maple sugar that we have infused ourselves or that we've bought at a sugar house during sugaring season, and make these more of a maple roll versus a cinnamon roll. You could add fine chopped nuts. I know my father likes them when I make, when I chop up either walnuts or pecans really small and add that to the filling. He also likes golden raisins. So you could mix up the filling and change it up and see what your family likes. It definitely is conducive to playing around with like that. But for this, we're gonna use our brown sugar, our cinnamon, and our butter. And I am just going to pour my butter, melted butter, in. And mix that up. And that is going to be my filling. So just give that a good stir. Get it all incorporated. My butter is melted and my dough has kind of gone back a little bit. So I'm just going to take it, just push it out a little bit more, especially towards the edges, get myself the full amount that I can. I don't know, since it's been so warm, I've been making a bunch of different kinds of breads and rolls and stuff, and I have had no trouble at all. Sometimes you do have a little bit of trouble with the rising, and I've had no trouble at all. I think because the heat definitely helps. It's much easier than doing it in a cold. You kind of have a older, draftier house in the winter. So there we go. And I am just going to take my butter and my brown sugar, and I'm just going to smear it over as much as I can. And, oops, that kind of clumped up a little bit. Just try to get it. You basically want to get it so that it's going to cover all of your dough. Okay. I'm just going to take my spatula and the dough and spread it all. Try to get it as close to the edges as possible. And the dough isn't super thin or delicate, so you don't have to worry about tearing into the dough. Just use your spatula like a paintbrush. My kids normally love doing this, and in fact, my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, was hoping to join me today. However, swimming won over. So that's where she is. All right, so once I have it, it's close. You don't want to go right to the edges, but as close to the edges as possible and spread out. Oh, that smells delicious. It's like those brown sugar and butter and cinnamon smells or candles that like totally remind you of fall. You're going to start rolling now, and you're just going to roll it like a jelly roll. You're going to start with your long edge, and you're going to roll away from you. So I literally just take my fingertips and roll. Just like you were playing with Play-Doh and you were going to be rolling a snake. Just like that. Just keep on rolling it. Get it to the top. And then I do one big roll because I want my seam, especially when I cut on the bottom. So then I'm just going to take it here. I'm going to fold over the edges at the very ends. And I have my log of goodness. Now is when you're going to cut it. You should be able to get 12 equally sized cinnamon rolls. And like I say, I'm never perfect. I just make sure when I feed my kids that I find the 3 that are the closest in size and offer those up at the same time. But we'll get these pretty close. You want a sharp knife, or a lot of people say you can use plain dental floss. We only use a little dental floss kind of picks, so that isn't an option here. So I have my knife. I always start in the middle, and I'm just going to cut straight down, get my 2 halves, and try to get 6 cuts on each side. Just straight down to cut them. The last little bit might not have a whole lot into it. Those I kind of call bonus buns at the very end. But try not to saw, just try to get a nice clean cut. Let's see how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, now, once you have them like this, you are going to go ahead and put them into your pan. So I start always with the middle. Oops, and I didn't get a great cut there. And what I do is I kind of just plop it like that and get it into a circle, and I'm going to put it into my dish, and I will show you that at the end. So let me try it again. I take it, kind of plop it on its side, make it circular shape like that, and put it in. And you're just going to do that for all of them. And you're going to give them a little bit of room. You don't want them touching because these will grow as they are baking. So take them, stand them so that they make like a cylinder shape, kind of pat it out into circles, and put it into your pan. Take it like that. Cut it. Now, if you were doing these at night, at this point, you would cover them over with saran wrap, put them in your fridge overnight. In the morning, you would want to take them out and leave them on your countertop for about 45 minutes to an hour. Let them warm up, get to room temperature, kind of do a little re-rise, and then you would bake them the normal baking time, which is about 15 minutes at 325. So these can be done the night before. And that way you don't have to mess up your kitchen first thing in the morning. I don't mind messing up my kitchen in the morning if I'm doing meal prep for that evening. Especially with activities and just being me. I'm gonna take some of that filling and put it up top. I like to get as much dinner prep done in the morning so that I'm not dealing with it as I'm coming in at 5, 6 o'clock after activities. So I just put, because these last little pieces, they're a little bit smaller and they don't have as much of the filling. So what kind of oozed out, I just don't want any of that goodness to waste. So I'm gonna put it in. And they're gonna be pretty snug in here. Let me show you. Whoops. This is what they are going to look like. Whoops, as they slide down. So you're gonna have them in your pan. And like I said, if you were doing this at night, you would just go ahead, cover it, put it in your fridge, and take it out in the morning. That will all be in the recipe. She tells you how to do that. Or you can put put these on a baking sheet, get them a little bit frozen just so that they're easier to handle. Maybe put them on a baking sheet, put a piece of parchment paper down, put them on a baking sheet, put them in your oven for about a half an hour just so they get a little bit easier to work with. Individually wrap them in saran wrap. Go ahead, put them into all of the individually wrapped ones into a Ziploc bag. Go ahead and put them in your fridge. So in case maybe you don't want to have 9 or 12 cooked, you could take out in the morning the ones that you want, whether you want 1 or 3. Same thing, put them in a baking dish, unwrap them, put them in a baking dish, let them rise for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then go ahead and bake them. So with these, I'm going to just cover them. Let them rise for about an hour. They will puff up. They probably at that point will be touching each other. That is totally fine. And then you are going to bake them at 325 for 12 to 15 minutes. I like to set my timer with these at 12 minutes and then start watching them. You want them to get a nice light brown coloring. Once you see that the dough is becoming light brown to like beige, then that's when you know that they are done. While they're baking, you can go ahead and you can make your glaze that you want to put on them, or your frosting, because you will want to put your frosting on or glaze while they're warm. So let me get this out of the way. And let me talk to you about, just do one little wipe here, about the glaze. On this recipe, they use more of a cream cheese frosting, which is just a little bit, I'm just gonna move my camera up. I feel like my head is being cut off. Just a little bit too thick for my kids. They like almost more like a maple roll, so just something a little bit lighter and more delicate. So that's what we go for. So for that, you are going to need some maple sugar. You are going to need just a little bit of water, and you are going to need some powdered sugar. And I will put this in the comments in case you do not want to do the frosting that is on the recipe. This is just what we used. So I eyeball it. I probably do about a cup of powdered sugar. So this is a quarter of a cup. So let me get. Okay. About a cup of powdered sugar. About a quarter of a cup of maple syrup. That will give it its flavor. And then a couple of tablespoons of water. And when you make a glaze like this, so I did 3 tablespoons. Less is always better, and you can add in. And then you are just going to stir it until it is dissolved. All the sugar is dissolved in the maple sugar and the water, and you have a nice glaze. You don't want any chunks, so you definitely want to use a whisk. You want to whisk away, and you don't want it as thin as water, but you don't want it thick like glue or paste. So I do think I may need to use a little bit more powdered sugar. I'm gonna grab some of this, put it in. Really, you can't ruin this glaze. And this is a lighter glaze. It's maple flavored. If you would have gone ahead and put maple sugar into your filling, that pairs up really nicely. And that powdered sugar is just going to dissolve super quickly. And when you take them, I'll show you what it looks like. Oops. So it's, not super thick, but not totally watery and runny. And when you take them out of the oven, let me show you what they look like. actually was able to salvage a few more. You're going to just, as they're warm, you're going to go ahead, oh, they smell delicious, and you're just gonna pour your glaze or put your frosting right on top of them hot out of the oven. And it kind of pulls up, what I use, I'm not sure if you can see, it pulls up in the bottom, so my kids love just grabbing it and then going ahead and kind of scooping up that goodness that's in the bottom. So that is just for the maple glaze, which is, like I said, just a little bit lighter. They do not like the frosting, but the frosting recipe that uses cream cheese and butter and vanilla extract and milk is attached in the recipe link. That's what the lady who created the recipe uses. We just prefer this as a lighter maple glaze. And that is it. Now I have cooked them in a throwaway pan, had them 100% cooked, and froze them just like that. And that has worked out as well. I take them out the night before, I leave them on the counter, and then in the morning, sometimes the kids will pop them in the toaster oven for a little bit. Sometimes they'll just eat them as is. The only thing when you freeze any baked products is you have to get it cooled. And if you think it's cool enough, let it cool even more. Even if I just took these out of the oven now at 1:30, I probably wouldn't package them up to put them in the freezer until well after dinner time, 8, 9 o'clock tonight, because you want them to cool completely, because if there's any heat and then it goes to cold, it's that moisture that's going to ruin the consistency of your dough and of your product. So what I would do is I would have it in a throwaway container. I would go ahead, I would wrap it with saran wrap. Sometimes I wrap it with tin foil. Then sometimes I put it into a plastic Ziploc bag, as much protection as possible, and throw them in the freezer. But you could just take them at the stage that we just finished those before you let them rise, and then you could go ahead and freeze them that way before you bake them, and then take them out in the morning and bake them. And they're beautiful, they're delicious, they have a light, airy dough. It's not heavy, it's not gonna sit in your stomach like a brick for the whole day. We've tried many different recipes, and that is one thing. When Maria asked me to do this, I said, but I don't create anything on my own. I pretty much, just scour things and borrow other people's, but I have taken the time. One thing I have done is I have taken the time, and I've tried many different recipes, and I can tell you out of the several that we chose, this is easy, and it's the one that my family likes the taste and the texture of the best. So you can have a fancy breakfast with minimal effort, especially if you make up the dough the night before. Just get up in the morning, pop them in the oven, and treat your family or your kids as they get ready to go back to school to a special breakfast. They are adorable. Putting a little candle in for a birthday breakfast. A lot of my kids will request this for birthday breakfast. We put a little candle in and have a special little treat and start our day off. But that is it. That is our cinnamon rolls. If you have any questions, please post them down below. I will definitely look at them once I am done and answer them. And I just say, give it a try. Working with dough, working with yeast, proofing bread is not difficult. It is time consuming. For this recipe, you have to make your dough, and then you have to let it rise for an hour. And then you do your filling and you roll, and you let it rise for about another hour, and then you have about 15 minutes of baking. So it is a time, but for this particular recipe, you could get a lot of that done the night before. But really, the steps are simple. The ingredients are things that I'm sure you all have in your home. Nothing outlandish, nothing kind of crazy. Basic, simple ingredients for delicious cinnamon rolls that I'm sure will not last long. If your house is like mine, they will be devoured right up. But thank you for joining me. Happy baking. And that's it for today. Bye-bye. Oh, that's so embarrassing.